Hey, Good News family. This is Tana Heineman, the host of our Now What podcast. This is where we unpack Sunday's message and we talk about how to practically apply it to our everyday lives. I love that you're here with us, and I love that we get the opportunity to spend more time with our pastors and have them teach us even more what the Word has to say about our everyday lives. We learned from Jesus that one of the best ways to grow is in community together. So join us as we unpack Sunday's message. Hi, Good News family. It feels like a lot has happened this week. I was reflecting and let's see, we've celebrated what we're thankful for and of all of God's blessings and, those kind of things. Thank you, God. We've gained 10 pounds. We kind of had our first snow. We moved up a size in our pants.
Yes.
We shopped Cyber Monday. We put up our Christmas tree.
Yes.
And now we have like 3 weeks to get ready for Christmas.
All of that is true.
Literally, all of that has happened since we were on the air last week. Yeah, it's a lot. Yep. The going up a size in pants is probably,
I wore sweatpants all the week of Thanksgiving. So when you do that,
then when you
life hack and you just wear sweatpants and you don't realize that you gained any weight.
Because then it shocks you your first day back to work and you're like, can I wear sweatpants with a sweater?
So yesterday we had a little celebration among the staff, and part of that celebration was dressing up. And I'll leave it at that. But I had to borrow a pair of my dad's pants. My dad is 6'4", and I think he's like a 36 waist. And I put them on thinking they would be way too big.
Way too big.
And they weren't. I was like really discouraged when I was like, oh, they fit. Oh,
listen,
I didn't even need a belt.
You've grown humans.
I mean, that is true.
You just need to plan that. Six of them.
So
yeah, those pants can fit however they want.
And the pie was worth it. Thanks, Mom.
Chris and I have just made a decision. We're rolling with it.
Yeah, literally.
When we hug now,
It's so squishy.
our stomachs touch, and then
Barely reach. Little T-Rex arms.
There's just more to love,
Is this what aging is?
I love
We're getting to the point where like,
it. Only gets better.
And I think you lose that whole, I don't care. Like,
there are a lot of those I don't care moments now of like, why did we care so much about so many things
yeah.
when we were younger? This is depressing. I don't want to talk about this anymore. Okay. Kingdom-minded stewardship. I feel like today might turn into like story time.
Good.
With PJ, Sarah, and Tana.
I wanted to be practical too, though, because we have a lot of stories. I didn't share a lot of stories because I think some people get turned off by that. If I would have heard those stories when I was 30 years ago, that would have made me mad.
So,
Like what? What do you mean? Made you mad? How?
Because I already had a certain mentality, and then to hear somebody blessed or God, and I would go, well, that never happens to me. So automatically I rule myself out, or it created all these inner things. So
Yes, I hear what you're saying. And I know you've said that in the last couple of weeks, like, regarding other topics. However, I think people expect you to say that because you're a pastor.
sure.
But people who are not in pastoral roles,
Yes.
I have a million stories of God's provision from a very, very ordinary person who just put into practice of what I believe to be doing the right thing. And I have countless stories of how God provided financially, but in so many other ways. You even touched on that on Sunday, like sometimes provision isn't financial necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
And I am a huge testament to that.
And I think over the last several weeks with us talking about, one of the maybe little mantras you wanted us to catch on to was believe, obey, trust. And I think some of the best ways that we learn how to believe, obey, trust is just hearing stories over and over and over. And what happens is, in the beginning, I think most of us have a pretty bad attitude. Yeah, of course that happened to you. Or, it never happens to me.
Mhm.
Or we do all that. That's, again, another ploy of the enemy to keep us, like that. Or the other way is when we're young, we also think, oh, I will do it so much better than them. I would never get myself in that kind of a mess until life happens. And you're like, oh, really? So there's just that competitive nature and that comparison. It's just yuck, and we do it. But as we sit in it and allow God to just really reveal to us, no, actually, this is really me. I want to be a part of your life, and I will bless you. But it may always look different. I mean, you talked about that a lot on Sunday of expecting the blessing to look a certain way and then having to recognize, no, the blessing was happening. It just looked different than what you were expecting because God knows best. And we have to trust him in that. Even, I think we talked about it a year ago, maybe when we were first starting the podcast, we'd had a finance one that we talked about. And I remember you, me, and Josh talking about it. And then you alluded to it again on Sunday of just sometimes we give and we expect money back.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's a job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. It
You know,
comes in
an extra shift, an opportunity to go help someone move, and they refuse to not let you help them without paying them. You know, it's requires action and work, not just a check in the mail.
Because that's how it looked for me a lot. I can't remember. I wish I had the notes that I took, but you said something about a lot of times when you do a good job, you get more work.
Right.
Yeah. And I think about that with my husband a lot because he works in corporate America and he was like, well, I got somebody else's job today. And that the shift in my mindset should be, it's because you did a good job. So God's knowing that he can trust you with more. And how often used to think, okay, God, you're going to save me through this big bonus or whatever. But it was like, God said, no, here's an opportunity to work and get more, earn more money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And when you look at Matthew 25, I think Matthew 25.
We'll just go with it.
Yeah. There's the principle of the faithful steward.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned so much. I remember when the Lord was teaching me through this, and it's the parable of taking care of the talent. And there are 3 different monetary amounts they were given to take care of. And the Lord would, the Holy Spirit would just say, it doesn't mean that they all had this huge capacity they could have grown into through their life. They were able to handle more, but there was a long time they were given money. They immediately went to work, and the master came back and said, what did you do? Excuse me. Well, what I gave you. And he said, enter into my joy, which was more work. But it was a joyful thing, not a laborious thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have found the older I get, the more I love certain aspects of my work, and I never want to retire. Doesn't mean I want to do, certain things the rest of my life, but there are other things that I never want to quit serving, giving, loving, preaching, whatever it is, because I love what I do. And I think that is the invitation God invites us into.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so good. Man, I just cut and pasted so many of your notes today because you said money itself is not the problem, but instead the attitude and attachment that people have towards it.
Yeah, I think you summed that up better than what I said.
Oh.
Very good.
Did I?
Yeah.
That's not what you actually said. I don't ever remember who's who, but I like that because culturally, money drives everything.
It does.
Success,
Everything. Always has.
title, position. How do we introduce ourselves? Oh, and what do you do? All those kind of things. And I remember when I was still staying at home raising my kids, and Nate would have a client meeting, and I would be invited to go. And I can vividly remember a clear one where it could not have been more obvious on the client and his wife's face that, oh, you stay at home. Suddenly, I was the most ignorant thing in the entire room. Like I knew nothing. And it was just one of those moments of, thank you, God, for the blessing that I have, that I get to stay home and raise my children in this season of my life, and help me not compare. But it is what we do. It's what we give value to or whatever. And so then it does affect our ability to focus, our ability to submit to the Lord, because we have this wrestle of, I drive, I've got to make money. We all 3 work for the church, so we've probably addressed that loss and mourned it.
And
we could have made more working somewhere.
it was a gift.
Probably even Costco.
So for the way I was raised, money was the answer, because
Right.
when you don't have enough,
Right.
the answer is to get more. But what my parents didn't understand is if they would have actually taken care of or invested or have been knowledgeable, they would have been because they actually got retirement. And then even in retirement, I watched them not use their money in a way that would create a return. It was, so, I can remember I would read these books like I was introduced to a whole new world,
Mm.
right? Biblically, I was learning about tithing and sowing and reaping, but then I would oftentimes not get the return on the expectation that I had. And so there would be times people would, I'd get maybe a bonus through church, or somebody would walk up and bless, and there were some incredible stories, but I kept going, something's missing. And so I started learning, and I would read things like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The Millionaire Next Door, these books that had biblical they're not biblical,
Right.
they're rooted in biblical principles, and I would watch them flesh out in the real world, and I was like, okay, I needed to start thinking practically about money. And then there are other people like Charlie Munger, who says you need to do everything you possibly can to make $100,000. And I was like, $100,000, oh my gosh, that would take forever. But then he said what money does, when it hits a certain threshold, it begins to produce money for you because of compounding interest.
I remember my dad saying it.
Because your dad's a banker.
He is.
And he understands money.
He understands money. I don't know if it was his original. I'm sure it wasn't. But regardless, he said, you need to learn how to make money while you sleep. And that's the principle of like the compounding interest. And I think he told me when I newly married, so 20, and I'm like, okay, can you mention that to Jake? I'm like, I don't know. But that principle of making your money work for you. And it's not manipulating your money. It's being wise with it.
That's right.
Yeah. So right. I can't remember exactly how you said it on Sunday, but you said people shouldn't work for money, make the money work for the people, or something like that. And I wish I had my notes because I wrote it down. But it was really profound of like, money is the tool, and back to what you were saying earlier, like, money, it's the flesh always craves more. So when you think, oh, once I remember when we were earlier in our marriage and we went through difficult financial times, and I was like, oh, when we get $1,000 in our bank account, we are going to be set. And then it was like, okay, when we get $5,000, we are going to be set. And it's like, but then when you get there and you're like, oh no, we need more. And so you're always going to want or crave more, I think, until you really adopt that kingdom mindset,
I think too, if a lot of people go, well, I don't have much. What does it matter if I give just this little bit of money? What's it actually doing? But the principle is, the more you make, it's still the same thing, because you think it'll be easier to give when you have more, but usually it's harder to release when you have more, because you now have options that you never had before, that you either want to spend your money or you want to go on a trip. So the principle of giving when you have little, it carries over no matter what we're going to give to the Lord, and we're going to tithe, and then we're going to, give offerings as well. So
I want to give Sarah the floor for a little bit and go back. Sarah and Jake used to be in ministry years ago, and for lack of a better term, got burned. So let's just set that right there. So if you've been hurt by the church or hurt by anyone in ministry or leadership or whatever, welcome to the club. They're all human, and they make mistakes, and they're pursuing Jesus and having revelation, sometimes at a much slower pace than we want them to. Just kidding. But it's true.
Sure.
It's just hard. So just right there, we'll celebrate even just seeing Sarah back in ministry and showing the healing process of what God has been doing over her in the last many, many years. But post-ministry, you are now having to figure out, what are we going to do with our lives?
Yep.
And you're married and have children. So give us a little bit of your story and your journey there.
So let's see. When we were released from ministry,
Yes.
that's what they call it, we had 3 kids and no savings, and the truth of the matter is, you don't go into ministry for the money. So no savings, paycheck to paycheck. I always struggled because we weren't, the struggle was, God gave us, we have this money, and we were never unwise with it. We weren't like going out to the movies and going I mean, it was like, we bought our groceries, we bought clothes.
Because bowling is very expensive, Sarah.
But it was always like, gosh, I just, it was just so stretching.
You're living in small town America.
Yep.
And you're working in a small church
on a small
Small,
salary
yep.
Yeah.
with 3 small children.
Yep.
So
And this was in 2008, 2009. So some of you, well, I guess most of you would have been alive by then, but some of you might have been very young. But so there was a recession. And so the housing crisis, all this. So we lost our job. We had to move back to Omaha. We moved into my parents' basement. It was super fun.
you and your husband and your 3 lovely children.
Yep.
Hey, Mom,
Yep.
we're home.
Thanks, Mom. Love you. Sorry about that.
Jake.
I'm depressed for you right
Like,
now.
imagine just even being the man.
It gets
and like,
worse. It gets worse.
And many of our listeners have been through
Yeah.
something where it's just embarrassing.
But
it's hard.
I can laugh and joke about it now because we're on the other side, and to see God's faithfulness through
Yes.
it all is amazing. So Jake, we come back. Jake worked at American Eagle, super fun clothing store that some of our former. So, he was in the back. He was working the freight, and I started working at Starbucks, which was hard for me because I had stayed at home with the kids. And so we were, that phrase, 2 ships that pass in the night.
Yeah.
I would come home. I worked
Tell them you're
4 a.m. to noon. So I would get up at 3 and be to
With
work
3
by
small children.
3:30. Yep. And then I would come home at noon. Whew, thank you, Lord. They were little, and we would all nap together. And so I would come in I'd get home at noon, and he would work the second shift. So whatever it was, 1 to 11 or anyways. And then, so that's how we lived because we were working and it was opportunity. God gave us this opportunity for these jobs. So we were working, and then he, thankfully he didn't have to do that long. He got on at PayPal. And so been at PayPal ever since. And again, started at the bottom, customer service. If you've ever worked customer service, people don't call you because they're super happy about their service.
Yeah.
They call because they're angry. And so he did that for a few years, and, slowly just started to get experience and work his way up. I hate the phrase work his way up the corporate ladder because it's not like he's a CEO, but he worked hard and God blessed him. And there were several times where he would apply for promotions and he wouldn't get it and he wouldn't get it. And we always reminded ourselves, okay, but remember, PayPal is not our provider. God is our provider. So the door, he will open the door or he will shut the door. And we had implemented the principle of giving already in our marriage. And that, you have mentioned that before, like that was one thing you could do.
Mhm.
And I feel that because I'm like, maybe in my immaturity, I was like, well, that's a box I can check. I know I can at least do that. But it was something that it's just been always a practice in our lives. So even when we were making nothing, we still gave that what we felt was right, the 10%. So just kept working and God kept giving us opportunities. And so I was a hustler, man. I worked at Starbucks and worked part-time at the school, still work at a hotel, just any opportunity to make the extra money. We said yes, if we could make it work with the kids and everything. So 3 kids turned into 4 kids and still living in my parents' basement, but had the opportunity to get on we were accepted into some income-based housing, which was humbling. But if you change your mindset and say, wow, God, thank you for a safe place that we can have our own home with me and my husband and our own children. And my parents were wonderful, and I thank God for them that they provided that support for that time. So then, again, just kept working our way out. We've talked about government assistance and income-based housing and supplemental food, what they call now SNAP, the SNAP program.
Is that what WIC was? Or is this
The SNAP is food stamps and WIC is women, infant, children. So it's just, but essentially
I had WIC.
very similar. And that was humbling, but we knew that it was temporary. As God kept providing opportunity and as we put in the work, and we were diligent and responsible with what God gave us, we worked our way out of that. And I remember telling Jake, I feel like we're at the bottom of this mountain of debt, and I don't know how we're going to get to the top. I don't know that it can happen. But you mentioned on Sunday, you're just waiting for, or you think maybe God will like, oh, here's the lottery and here's a lump sum of money. And I was like, yeah, maybe that'll happen to me. I shared this with them earlier, but I remember sitting in my parents' basement half asleep because, I was getting up at 3:30 and I was watching a show about a gentleman who got in a car accident and he got a huge settlement. And I was like, God, if that is the way that you want to get us out of this debt, I will do it. Give me a car accident. I will take the settlement. And now looking back, I'm like, wow, I am so glad that God did not answer that prayer. But when you're in that poverty mindset of like, just get me out of this. And for us, it was difficult too, because our debt and our financial issues were not because we were irresponsible with the finances we had. It was just life.
It's so funny because I'm thinking Carissa's prayer would have been, Lord, if Jason needs to be in an accident, he needs to lose an arm. We'll do that.
I submit.
She
Lord,
does not
I
have a
submit.
poverty mindset.
And then Jason on the altar.
Anyway,
I'll stay with that one-armed man. So anyways, and there was even a time where because it was the recession, we had bought a house in the small town that we lived in, and we couldn't sell it, which is part of the reason we were living at my parents, because we still own this home, and we felt strong conviction that in a time when everyone else was walking away from their financial responsibilities, meaning they would turn the house over to the bank, we were like, yep.
This is
We were like, no, we bought this house.
Yep.
We need to try and sell it. So we tried for 18 months. So we were living with my parents for 18 months. And finally we felt like, okay, God, we've done everything we can do. We're going to walk away. And we felt a release about that. So we were going to declare bankruptcy, and we were hours. I'm telling you, you guys, we had met with the attorney. We had the paperwork drawn up. We had tried to do a short sale on the house, which I don't want to get into all the details because I don't even always understand it. But it was basically like selling the house back to the bank and paying the difference or something like that. And they wouldn't accept it at a time where banks across the country were accepting this because of the recession. Our bank would not accept it. So we were like, okay, then we're just going to have to declare bank because we can't live like this anymore. And so had the paperwork drawn up. I was working at Starbucks and I had the evening shift. So it was, I'm not kidding you, like 4:30 in the afternoon. And Jake called me and I'm thinking, oh no, who broke their arm? Like what kid needs to go to the hospital? Because he never called me at work. And he goes, you're never going to believe this, but the attorney just called me. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, oh no, what's, and he's like, the bank decided to settle. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, we don't have to declare bankruptcy. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And so there's a lot of details with that, but even how God worked through the details. And we ended up giving this, the bank said, yep, give us this. We'll call it good. And I was like, with all due respect, I never want to hear from you again. And they're like, yep, you are good, free to go, live your lives. And it's just amazing to see how God provided the opportunities for work, was faithful in providing the opportunity and the means, the money, the resources, all that. And I remember, I don't remember who said it, but God always does his part. It's never because God didn't do his part. Jake and I had to do our part, but God did his part for sure. And now I look at my life and, we're by no means like, living this, we're millions in vacation. But like, man, I tell my kids all the time, we have everything we need and a lot of the things we want.
That's right.
And it's because I truly believe it's because we made that decision. God, you are a provider. PayPal's not our provider. Our jobs you are a provider. We will be faithful with what you've entrusted us. We will obey what we believed was the tithe and the offering. And God, man, he just always works out. Sometimes it's, through all that process, I also had cancer. So, but God worked it out to where we applied for financial assistance through the hospital. After my insurance, they were like, don't worry about it. We got it covered. And it's like, man, God,
Thank you.
Just all those kind of details. It's amazing how just thinking back, you're like, man, he is really good. He is really good.
Yeah. I wanted to share kind of our story just for, and honestly, where the desire, like when I got saved, I loved giving, but then God did something in my heart, in our off season, our desert
I love that's what you
season,
call that, the
wilderness
off
season.
season. Yeah.
So we were let go from a church, and I remember the guy that I was the executive pastor, and he said, Jason, we need to let you go. And I remember, how you in movies you see the telescoping? It literally did that. We went, boom, and then came back. Chris was pregnant with our second, Bree, and we went through this series of move back home, and I sleep like for 3 straight weeks. I'm ashamed. I am tired. It didn't work out. The thing they told me they were hiring me for didn't work out the way they said it would. And so then I get this job in a factory that somehow they turn oil into beads and it becomes tires. So they ship it out. So I would be covered in like oil.
Grease
Yeah.
you.
And I remember, how we'd have to shower every day before we left. But I mean, just caked. And I'm going, man, I came from this church that people from all over the world would be a part of. I'm working in this place. And then we went, okay, we can't stay here. We need to move back to Florida. So we moved back. Walmart hires me again because it's the second time I've worked there. And they normally don't do that. So door open. And I'm working overnights. I'm working at a pizza shop, an Italian restaurant, making pizzas in the evening. I am working for my supervisor is one of Carissa's old students.
Yikes. Mm-hmm.
And I almost get into a fight, literally a fist fight with this guy who's telling me what to do in it. And and then Bree has, her issues. But I remember, so we were in Alabama and they had talked the pastor into give us 2 extra weeks of pay. All right. Just as you didn't get vacation or whatever. So we're sitting this 2 weeks. So Chris is having some pregnancy issues before Bree is born. And we go and we have to wait for 9 hours in the ER, to get her checked. And when we get to Florida, bills start coming in from that. And because we made $100 too much because of the 2 weeks extra pay, that now we owed bills from that. And they didn't take taxes out of my pay at the church. So now we owe that. And it's like wave after wave after wave. And $3,000 or $4,000 might have as been $40,000.
I was going to say $1 million. Like, yeah.
Because anyway, so, and I remember during that time, but I get another job. I leave Walmart. I get another job, and the Lord had been talking to me about Joseph, right? About Manasseh and Ephraim. You have blessed me in the land of my affliction. You helped me forget all of my father's house and sorrow and things like that. And so he's doing this work. But in the meantime, we keep sowing and giving to people. We don't, like, literally, we would set aside money that was supposed to be for Christmas, and we would just sow it into people. And this man walked up, and I told Carissa, I said, I really want one day to have this fund that we give money to, and somehow it develops money that now we can impact the kingdom in this way. And we were dreaming, you don't have anything, but you're dreaming, and it's real. It is real. And this man from England comes in and speaks at Chris's dad's church, and we sowed into him. But at lunch, he pulled us aside and he said, I have a word for you from the Lord. And so pulled us into, her dad's office, and he goes, the Lord says millions of dollars will flow through your hands for the kingdom of God. And we were going, yep. Her parents are freaking out. Like, oh my, and we're going, he said, but you already know that, don't you? I did. Yeah, we did. We had nothing, but we knew. And so I've watched through the years as that dream, we went, there's no way. And now we're going, this is really possible, because we've learned about finances. We've learned how the kingdom works. We've learned how money works. We've learned, we've got kingdom builders but I think that is a promise for Chris and I. And I am really satisfied in this terrible, ugly shirt. And, because I want to bless the kingdom, and this thing keeps growing in me. And so, that was 20 something years ago, but now Chris and I are beginning to dream and believe of how we can make bigger impact in the kingdom of God. And it's just crazy. Sometimes it starts when you have nothing. Most people think, well, it's when I'll have something, that's where the dream starts. It's not. And so you steward and you're faithful, and God develops stuff in you.
It's so funny that you say that, because I remember, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I remember when we were living at my parents' house and we'd have to get on the interstate to go to church. And they always had that billboard with the lottery, and it would be like $500 million. And we would dream about what we would do with $500 million. And it was always like, okay, we would, pay off our parents' homes at the times and maybe our siblings. And then I was like, and we would give this money to, like a Shore Women's Center. We would give this money to Sheepgate, which was formerly Teen. And it's like, it's always so, I know the principle of like, it's more blessed to give than receive. It's so fun to be able to give to people and bless other people. So it starts when you have nothing.
Yeah.
And then it's just such a process. Like 20 years ago or 15 years ago when Jake and I went through all of this, I never would have, fast forward 15 years, I would not have seen us here, but it's because we didn't quit. And you talked about that Sunday too. It's like, don't quit, just keep at it. It's a grind sometimes. But God, like, be faithful. God is faithful.
Yeah. When Joseph, so when you look at his life, he was betrayed, sold into slavery, but God had a plan, even in the midst of all the trial, the betrayal, the loss, the being stripped, and he was then falsely accused and then put into prison, but he was still faithful there. So during all of this time, he's faithful, but he's learning. He's learning how officers work in the government. He's learning how people messed up, because you had the cupbearer, you had the bread baker, whatever he was, and he's learning what to do and what not to do in royal court. And then when it's his time, because he interpreted dreams, he's got a plan and God speaks to him and he's elevated, but he already knows how to work as an officer. He already knows what to do and what not to do. And then God gives him a plan. And, when his brothers come before me, he said, what you planned for evil, God planned for good, for the saving of many. And so in our trial or our circumstance, we can't get lost in what's happening. We've got to go, God, what do you want to do? How do you want to meet me? What's my part in this? But then how are you going to utilize this? And I just know that it doesn't matter where you come from, what you've done, what you've been through. There is the redemptive nature and part of God that he wants to restore. And he has been my biblical hero. It is something that keeps growing within me. It's why we have the Joseph House. This idea that why we're here at Good News and our part in this time in history is to be the saving of many or the impacting of many. And so, for the listener or the watcher, if you're, regardless of where you are, what your circumstance is, begin to engage God, be faithful with the little, believe that God is doing something. And if you'll take care of the little, God will see fit to bring more. You're responsible for it. It may come through work, but there will be more that God gives you to steward.
I was just going to say, well, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, a lot of times the question will come up, well, how much should I tithe? How much should I give? Is tithing an Old Testament principle? Do we still do it today? And we can go through all that. But I was going to say so many times it's a heart posture or character of God is generous. So it actually started with you. I don't even know if you remember this. There was a short time where I volunteered in the youth ministry when you were the youth pastor. Thank you for that. We can talk about it later. But I remember you had a word of the year. And so why are you laughing?
Oh, it's so funny. I didn't even know I had a word of the year back then.
Yes, you did. And I've had one every year since then. My first word of the year was generous. I want to be generous. And so that was the heart posture that I wanted to take because God is generous. I want to be like my Father. I want to be generous. And so that is in giving money to people, to the church. But it's also like, hey, I have this bag of clothes that my kids grew out of. I'm not going to sell it on Facebook Marketplace. I'm going to gift it to you. And that's not, for people who do that, there is no judgment. Because maybe that's an opportunity that God's giving you to make extra money.
Right.
But in my situation, it was people have been generous to me. God has been generous to me. I'm going to be generous to you.
That is a form of sowing.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. And I remember even just now as I'm thinking of it, Jake and I have been able to give a car away. Like we needed a new car because we had another baby, and so we needed a bigger vehicle. And so we had this van that we had paid off, and there was a lady that I worked with. I work part-time at the Hilton downtown, and we had worked together, and I knew she was a single lady with adult children, but was taking care of her grandchildren, and she needed a car. And like to be able to give that to her, had you had told me 10 years ago that I would be in a position to get, and it was not like it was this brand, but it was a safe, reliable vehicle. And just to be able to see how we could gift that to someone else because God had gifted so much to us. It's really an incredible
It is.
like gift to be able to give to others because I wanted to be generous. You know what I mean? So I think giving and however you decide and what you decide to give, it starts with that heart posture of generosity.
That's what I'm hearing from both of you, even as you're talking about the process of watching God bless you and give. And neither of you has talked about so that I can have more stuff or so I can take trips or I can do this. It's so that he can get it through you to be able to do other things, to be generous, to be on mission. And that's what I hear. And that is the mindset that we all need to work from.
It's the I'm blessed to be a blessing.
Yes. I mean, Nate and I used to say it. I mean, I don't know whose phrase it is, but it's if you give it to me, you can get it through me or whatever. And we would say that all the time of, God, we don't want things just to have things, but if you give to us, we will give to others. You just have to
And
tell
I think
us what
about
to
that
do.
with you and Nate in your home. The most hospitable, always opening your home, always hosting people, life groups, teenage groups, everything. It's because you and Nate have it like nothing is yours, everything is God's. And he uses you to minister to people through that.
And it comes from decades of God using other people to take care of me. And so then it just reciprocates. I mean, just even if we're doing all these flashbacks, it's like when I was 19 and pregnant with my daughter and the whole, you made $100 more, so you had to pay your bills. I was thinking about that. Don't get me started on that whole system. But for a little bit of time, of course, as a single mom, I was in college, and I was on Medicaid and WIC and Section 8 housing. But and I felt like God, I was in college, but I felt like God was telling me that I needed to work and not continue school. So I put school on hold, and somebody in the church helped me start a cleaning business, and I started cleaning people's houses, and that's incredibly humbling.
Yes, it is.
But and just remembering as you're honest and turn in how much your income is, then suddenly it's like, well, now your apartment rent has to go up. Oh, now you don't qualify for this. Nope, now you can't get Medicaid. And those are all tricky things. But again, if God can be trusted, then he can be trusted.
100%.
And so it was one of those, okay, God, I'm working hard. I'm being diligent.
You're being honest.
I'm being honest.
Paying your taxes
and
on
paying
what
my
could have been
taxes.
paid under the table.
Yep. I married an accountant.
That's true.
Brilliant. And just those hiccups along the way of doing the right thing, we're still, you keep doing the right thing. Because if God will provide, he will provide. And he just kept doing that and kept providing and had already been taught to tithe. So even as a single mom, tithing was number one. There is no, we could talk about that. I'm going to caveat a little bit, but I think you mentioned it on Sunday, tithing is an Old Testament principle. I understand that. People hear that now and they say, well, I don't live under the Old Testament, therefore I don't need to tithe. Let me finish what I'm thinking and you tell me if I'm right or wrong. But Sarah and I are talking about it. We just finished the Sermon on the Mount. Everything Jesus says is, you've heard it said, or you've been taught, do this. He doesn't take it a negative. He takes it a positive, like even greater.
He adds
he adds to it. So if you've heard it say, don't kill someone, I'm saying don't even hate him. If you've heard it said, da-da-da-da, I'm saying da-da-da. It's always added to. So I don't see how I can say, well, I don't live under the Old Testament. What I hear is, therefore, tithing is the practical number one sowing and reaping principle. And Jesus would say, and you're a cheerful giver on top of that. And to whom much has been given, you just keep giving it. Your cup will be overflowing. It doesn't mean, oh, good, now I don't have to tithe. It means, actually, the tithe doesn't even have to almost be addressed because he says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, give to God what is God's. With the Jews hearing that being said, they would already understand that, yeah, we already baseline.
This is how we live.
That's the basic part. And so now
We
you're
fought
giving
for the tithe. It didn't matter what season. It didn't matter what we went through. We said we will give no matter what.
no matter what.
No matter what.
Yep.
And then we would give the offerings on top of that. I'll say this. So you mentioned give to Caesar what is Caesar. So that scripture was a trap. right? That the guy was trying to trap him.
Yes.
Do you have to give to the government or do you give to God? So he was trying to create this either or. And Jesus probably rolled his eyes, but he said, give me a coin whose picture's on there. And he said, Caesar. He said, well, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, give to God's what is God's. And the follow-up question should have been, whose inscription is on you?
Mm.
You made in the image of God, then what's God's? And so for us, it was the tithe, and then it was we are going to be generous. And, some people always want to get out of something rather than finding themselves in it. And so for us, it was putting seed in the ground, knowing, God, I know what your word says. I don't know how you're going to do it. I don't know how long it's going to take, but you're going to meet me. And I believe what your word says, and we've seen that to be true. And I make my kids tithe.
Yep.
I position them. That seems like a law and a mandate, but I'm positioning them to find out and discover what God is like. And they will do it, but God will prove himself true.
And my oldest, I love it. He is motivated by money, but the goal and even teaching him is, obviously that like God is your provider and you manage money well. But I love it because he just asked me on Sunday, he's like, wait, how am I supposed to give my money on his tithe online through the phone and stuff? So it's awesome to see when you've taught your kids to tithe, them starting to do it on their own now that he's kind of an adult. He's an adult in the eyes of the law, but he's still my baby. But I love what you said about if God can be trusted, then he can be trusted, because sometimes it's not about it's not about giving your money. It's about surrendering to God and obeying him. So it's like when you give, it's putting God in a position or telling God, I trust you. I trust you.
Yep.
I thought about that almost. I have yet to find, but I hesitate to use the word almost. I think every difficult question or every question in life so far that I've encountered comes back to the root question of, can I trust him?
Yep.
So far, the answer has always been yes. I'm sure it will always be yes, but I'm still trying to work through, has there ever been a question that I'm struggling with of can God be trusted? And so far, the answer is no. So even in this situation of like finances, it's can God be trusted? If God is trustworthy, then he is trustworthy.
Yep.
So,
yep.
I think too, sometimes we talk about the biblical principles. I still think you have to be educationally or educated maybe on how finances work.
mhm.
And where I think maybe the church is failing our people is we're not teaching people how to handle money and the purpose of money and why.
I will say, a couple times a year we offer Financial Peace. I do think the name Financial Peace University might scare people away. It's not college. It's just a class. But that was life-changing for Nate and I, because even though he was a starting up accountant and he understood money or whatever, I had my own business, so I understood business to a point. But it was still like coming and going as fast as it would. As we got to pay this bill, we got to pay this bill, we got to do this, we got to do that. And the stress was so big. And then going into Financial Peace and being able to take charge of where our money was going and learn practical things of what to do, understand. Well, I'll be honest, I let Nate understand it, but understanding how to invest, even as simple as keeping all my money in a checking account versus putting some of my money into a savings account, because the savings account will draw more interest the way you set up at your bank. Like, it may seem little, but over time, over time it grows. And there is nothing wrong with growing your money. It is actually good stewardship, so that then you have more to put towards the kingdom by following the principles that God put in place in the first place.
I'm so passionate. So I just never learned it.
We're running out of time.
I
We
know.
have to loop in this question.
So here's the thing: is one decision made right is good. A decision made correctly over the course of a lifetime is compounding.
Right.
That's why we tithe. It's why we do right with our money. It's why we become educated about money. It's why we do the right things with our money. It's why we find the right investments with our money. It's why we allow the 90% changes because of the way we handle the 10%. All of those things are how God forms and changes and transforms us in here, but then it transforms the way we live, right? God is not afraid of you to having things. He's not afraid of you spending money. He's not afraid of you enjoying your life, because if you'll handle your things right, all of those opportunities will be there, and there'll still be excess for you to give away or invest in the kingdom. So, I challenge people, don't be intimidated by asking for help, or don't quit, don't give up, don't say this does not work, because the principles of God always work. It may take time.
For sure.
You kind of shared some final thoughts with us in your sermon on Sunday of just kind of how you approach your finances now. Again, some of these are Financial Peace University principles that you can go through with the class teacher in the class, and you learn from each other. It's really encouraging. Some of our close friends we met going through Financial Peace, and I think we went through it 2 or 3 different times. And I'll be honest, Dave Ramsey is the founder of Financial Peace, and I would say to Nate, his name is like a swear word to me. If I have to hear, what would Dave Ramsey do? One more time. Or if I have to hear, how much cash is in your envelope? I'm going to lose my mind. But I'm so thankful that we disciplined ourselves to live like that, so that now God can be in charge. He can say anything, and I'll trust him. I'll give it away.
Sorry.
No, you're
But
good.
even, I remember last week you said, everybody wants the promises of God, but not the processes of God.
Yes.
Discipline is a process of God.
It is.
Yes.
If you want the end goal, it's in the process.
Right.
It's in the discipline. Those are the hard things that it's like the inconvenient truth, or like the difficult truth is probably a better way of saying it. Like, there are things God will do his part, do your part.
We talked, I think, before when we were doing sound check, we talked about losing weight and all the magic wonders that are out there, and what symptoms people are willing to work through just to lose that weight. And it's like, but we won't do the same with our money.
Yeah.
Or we won't do the same even with our transformation.
Right.
The process of like, listen, God didn't fail you. God didn't disappear. You woke up today and you feel like you fell out of love with Jesus. We'll talk to him about it. Figure it out. You didn't fall out of love with Jesus. That's a decision. That's a choice. Let's wrestle that out. What am I wrestling through? What am I blaming God for? What lies am I listening to?
Yeah.
Every area of our life requires process and discipline. And we just don't always want it.
So here's a list of things that if you don't know where to start, this is, and you haven't gone through Dave Ramsey's classes, and so there were a number of things that I wanted to do. First of all, I was pretty good at saving, so I made sure that I tithed, and then I paid myself first after that. So I always had a certain amount that went into savings, no matter what. Second, if you work for a company that has a 401k and they do matching, make sure you give something, because the company will match how much you give to a 401k.
Let me interrupt right there. We went through a season where we were paying off debt. And I asked Nate, I know this goes against your principles of finance, but could we pause on paying on our 401k until we get rid of this debt that we're paying all this interest? Because we're basically swapping money or whatever. And so we did that for a short season. It killed him, but we did it for a short season until you paid off all the debt. So we just, those are things we need to be willing to look at and be creative with, because all that debt that's building up interest is killing us.
So think about it. If your interest costs 5% and you're getting double your money that you are getting matched, it may be wiser to have some money matched while you're paying off. The other thing is, I contacted Scott Searcy at Thrivent. Scott, this is for you, buddy. I love that guy. But we started putting money into Roth IRA, and that is post-tax money. So no matter what, the government can't touch that money. And so, and I remember I made for literally probably 2 years, we would, max out what we could afford to that. And every month I was going, oh my gosh, I don't know if we're going to be able to make it financially. But we were doing something in order, to build something that would be post-tax. And so there's ways that you can begin to approach. It's a mindset, it's a discipline, but there are ways that you can begin to accrue finances and allow your money to work for you, like we talked about. And it's not this, I hope it happens, you need a plan.
And that's why it's important to ask people.
Yeah, that's right.
People who know. You don't know what you don't know. Yeah.
There's Charlie.
They're good at it. They're so good at it.
Yeah. There's a guy in our church that the workers at his company, he knows that a lot of times they are paying a lot of fees in their investing, and he'll show them, here's where I want your money to go. Here's the way I want you to invest. It makes more percentage-wise. It costs less percentage-wise. And they, Charlie loves to help people get better. And so there are people in our church that want to help you.
And I love
better.
that because, and we had talked about this too, some people are not wired for money, statistics, math.
Right.
I'm one of them. I'm like, math, numbers, hard. Help me, somebody. So go to those people who are gifted in that way, who God has wired them with attention to detail. Nate, I mean, all these like money-minded people, I know that they're more than willing to help. They love it. Like you said, Charlie loves it. So ask them.
And I think one other thing that just is coming into my mind, I can't find it in my notes, but just checking our mindsets. And if we came from no money and we choose to live from that same mindset, we're going to still have
Always.
no money. But living in a place of confident expectation in the Lord, of seeking out education and learning, of being willing to be disciplined and change things that habits I've had, and be willing to, you said it, live lean for a while.
Yeah.
None of us are willing to live lean. Man, you got to be willing to live lean if you want to see the changes happen and the debt go away and the stress of not knowing if we're going to make it, or if if we get a flat tire, we're busted. Like those kind of things. Like no, I want to get to where that's not so stressful anymore. And it doesn't mean you have to have a lot of money. It's that you have control over what your money's doing, so that when the tire goes flat, I have an emergency fund. I'm going to fix the tire, then I'm going to refill the emergency fund, and I'm going to keep moving forward. And just like the parable you talked about, talents is a kind of money in the Bible. The talent is, it's not that one guy's only given 1 and one guy's given 5 and one guy's given 10. It's not like
According to their ability, and your ability can be honed and grown. So if you don't know anything about money, I'm begging you to ask. There's no shame in not knowing.
No.
But there is an issue with you not wanting to know. Because it can hurt you.
Yeah. Well, I think that is a great place to stop, and just really being kingdom-minded in how we steward what the King gives us is why this message fits into the Kingdom-Minded series. And just being encouraged to know, if you want to hear stories, you need to talk to people and see and watch what God has done, and watch the discipline and the choices that people make to get to where they are, not just living and going, well, that's never going to be me. Because think of where you would be if you still thought from there. Think of where I would be if we still thought from there. Like, no, God, I'm so thankful that you challenged my thought, you transformed my thoughts, and helped me to learn discipline and trusting him and watch what he wants to do in and through us. So thanks, guys, so much for being here. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, PJ, for your time today. And I hope you have a great week, and we will chat again next time.
Thanks again for joining us today. We would love for you to tell others about the podcast. Make sure you subscribe to it too, because this will help others find out about it. If you missed it before, we love to hear from you. So if you have any stories to tell about how the message impacted you, or maybe you have a question or comment, make sure you email us at podcast@goodnews.church. Y'all, this is my favorite day of the week. So go give away what you just learned, and we'll chat again next time.